Wolverines, The Last Stand, a policy brief by Tierney Boxey, Jessica Coleman, and Julia Krasny.
According to the Endangered Species Act, a threatened species is defined as any species which is likely to become an endangered species within the foreseeable future throughout all or a significant portion of its range.
On February 1, 2013, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service proposed to list the distinct population segment of the North American wolverine as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. As it stands, protections would only prohibit intentional take of the wolverine by way of hunting or trapping. Currently, Montana is the only one of the lower 48 states where an annual quota of 5 animals is permitted. Human activities in wolverine habitat would neither be prohibited nor regulated, as they are not considered by the service to be threats to the species. The service is seeking input on 2 considerations: the necessity to prohibit incidental take of the wolverine, and whether or not it is prudent to designate critical habitat for the species. Additionally, the service aims to reintroduce the wolverine to its historic range in Colorado. Scientific information and public comments regarding these proposals will be accepted until May 6, 2013. A final determination will be made in 1 year based on the best available science.
The wolverine goes by many names and yet remains one of the most misunderstood animals in North America. Preceded by its reputation as a vicious killer and overshadowed by pop culture namesakes, the reality and magnificence of the wolverine is often lost to the general public. Wolverines are native to a variety of Arctic, subarctic, tundra, and boreal habitats located in the northern hemisphere, not only in North America, but also in parts of Eurasia, including Russia, Siberia, Finland, Sweden, and Norway. Within these habitats, a solitary wolverine will claim a very large territorial range. A single male will patrol and defend a territory that can exceed 250 square miles and will usually overlap the territories of several females. Females have smaller territories, which are usually no larger than 100 square miles. Wolverines spend much of their lives in solitude, leaving their mother at approximately 1 year of age to search for a territory of their own. Once a territory is found, the individual will claim the borders of the territory using highly pungent scent markers, and will fiercely defend the boundaries from others of its kind. Wolverines come together only to breed and raise kits. The kits will remain with their mother for as long as a year, and it is not uncommon for the father to occasionally return to help raise his offspring. A wolverine can be recognized by its compact and stocky body with short legs and broad muscular frame, preceded by a rounded head with small eyes and ears. Many claim that it is comparable in appearance to a small bear. At adult size, the wolverine will range from 16 to 34 inches in length with an additional 7 to 10 inch tail, and will stand at approximately 12 to 18 inches in height. This translates into the average wolverine weighing in at only about 25 to 50 pounds. Despite the bear-like appearance, the wolverine is in fact a member of the Mustelidae weasel family. It is the largest land-dwelling member of its family, exceeded only by the marine-dwelling giant otter. Their coat consists of a layer of oily, weather-resistant guard hairs atop a thick, insulating undercoat. Coloring can range from deep brown to nearly black, with legs and facial areas being darker than the rest of the coat. Most distinct to the animal's appearance is a lateral stripe of pale, buff-colored fur that runs along the wolverine's side from shoulder to tail. Because of their harsh living conditions, wolverines have been forced to adapt to their unforgiving habitat, both physically and mentally. One of the most specialized features is the wolverine's paws. Enormous in comparison to the rest of its body, the animal's paws serve as snowshoes, allowing the animal to quickly traverse long distances over snow and ice in search of food, sometimes up to 15 miles in a single day. Travel is also aided by the animal's claws, which are curved and extremely sharp. Using these claws, the wolverine is able to climb snow and ice-covered mountains, and even scale cliff faces with ease. Another important adaptation is the wolverine's strong nose, which can be used in both hunting and scavenging. A wolverine can smell the carcass of an avalanche victim buried in up to 20 feet of snow. For many animals, the ability to find such a carcass would be wasted, as it would be impossible to eat. This is not so for the wolverine. Razor-sharp teeth and incredibly strong jaws enable the wolverine to not only eat frozen prey, but to consume every last trace of it, even the bones and teeth. A wolverine's remarkable fearlessness and unproportional strength are its most well-known features. Despite the fact that the wolverine is much smaller than most of the animals that it encounters, these animals will not hesitate to fight predators as large as black bears or to single-handedly hunt and take down prey as large as an adult moose. For better perspective, the latter can be compared to a house cat hunting and taking down a deer. The fearlessness and strength is also accompanied by an incredible level of endurance. In 2009, a wolverine named M56 was captured near Grand Teton National Park. Scientists tracked M56 using radio equipment and were astonished by its journey. It traveled 550 solitary miles during April and May over highways, mountain ranges, and across state lines.
The wolverine faces a variety of threats that work in combination to impede its persistence. Human-caused mortality, both historically and currently, is the most detrimental. In North America, human interaction with wolverines began with the fur trade, when they were harvested for their frost-resistant pelts. Simultaneously, the reputation of the wolverine was rooted with European settlers, who regarded them as fierce and vicious vermin. Due to their scavenging nature, wolverines often raided traps and cabins, marking them with musk and urine. For these reasons, fatal methods of predator control were used to reduce wolverine populations. In 2004, Krebs and colleagues determined survival rates and causes of mortality in North American wolverines. Data for 62 mortalities of 239 radiomarked individuals were analyzed. The study established that the survival of trapped populations was significantly lower than that of untrapped populations, with human-caused mortality being the most additive to natural mortality. Driven by anthropogenic factors and climate change, habitat loss and fragmentation also serve as major threats to wolverine populations. Habitat conversion and human activities have encroached upon the home ranges of wolverines, eliminating much of the southern extent of their distribution and driving them further northward. Pressure on wolverine populations and habitat has been influenced by activities including human settlement, highway and railways development, hunting and trapping, timber harvest, natural resource extraction, hydroelectric development, and backcountry recreation. As a boreal species, wolverines are sensitive to the timing and duration of snow cover. It is argued that the aerial extent of persistent spring snow defines the bioclimatic niche of the wolverine. Studies indicate that all wolverine denning sites are located in areas that retain snow in the spring. As a result, their distribution is restricted by this requirement, and thus, wolverines are vulnerable to global climate change. Global warming will continue to constrain suitable wolverine habitat and connectivity. The combined result of restrictive habitat requirements, detrimental anthropogenic and climatic threats, and limiting life history traits is reflected in the low abundance of wolverines and a series of genetic difficulties that the species struggles to combat. Wolverines are considered to be one of the rarest carnivores in the contiguous United States. Currently, it is estimated that there are only 250 to 300 wolverines in the lower 48 states. However, management techniques and conservation strategies for the wolverine are difficult to determine due to the elusive nature of the species. An understanding of the demographic factors important to the conservation of wolverines is limited due to their inhabitants of remote areas, solitary and secretive lifestyle, and potential to be highly vagal. These characteristics make the wolverine difficult to observe. In addition to demographic information, specific aspects of the environment upon which the wolverine depends are also unknown.
According to ESA standards, in order for a species to be considered threatened or endangered, it must be determined as such by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which looks over scientific data collected by local, state, and national scientists. After data is collected and reviewed, the service begins to assess the listing of a species based on pressing urgency and whether or not adequate protections exist through other means besides the ESA. The data that the service looks at to determine the status of a species is categorized into the following 5 factors. Factor A, the present or threatened destruction, modification, or curtailment of the species' habitat and range. Factor B, overutilization for commercial, recreational, scientific, or educational purposes. Factor C, disease and/or predation. Factor D, the inadequacy of existing regulatory mechanisms. And Factor E, other natural man-made factors affecting the continued existence and long-term survival of the species. If the scientific research presented to the service reveals correlation with one or more of the above factors, then the species can be listed as threatened or endangered. Once the listing of the species is defined, the ESA will do what it needs to in order to make the species populations healthy and vital like they once were. The ESA will protect the species from take, which refers to the harassing, harming, pursuing, shooting, wounding, killing, trapping, capturing, or collecting of the threatened or endangered species. It also implements laws that protect the species from interfering during their breeding periods, as well as behavioral activities and degradation of critical habitat. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has been reviewing these factors for their proposal to list the wolverine as a threatened species. The listing would end the trapping and capturing of the animals for their fur and would protect the species in the contiguous United States as a distinct population segment, meaning that the species is geographically separated from the rest of its kind. There are a number of influences affecting the wolverines in relation to Factor A. These include climate change, dispersed recreational activities, infrastructure development, transportation corridors, land management, and human use and disturbance. Human disturbances may reduce the wolverine's ability to complete essential life history activities, such as foraging, breeding, maternal care, routine travel, and dispersal. However, wolverines have been documented to persist and reproduce in areas with high levels of human use and disturbance. Thus, the loss of habitat from climate change is considered a threat to wolverines, but human disturbances are not. Factor B, which refers to overutilization for commercial, recreational, scientific, or education purposes, is less of a problem now than it has been in the past. Trapping of wolverines used to be the primary cause for the mortality and threatened status of the species, but as of late, this is only a concern in Montana, where take by means of hunting and trapping is permitted. Factor C, disease and predation, do not affect the wolverine. There are no known or potential effects of disease on wild wolverine populations. As for predation, wolves, black bears, and mountain lions sometimes kill wolverines. However, this does not occur to the extent that predation would be considered a threat to wolverine population sizes. Factor D, which refers to the inadequacy of existing regulatory mechanisms, is another factor that does not constitute a threat to wolverine populations. Wolverine habitat in the lower contiguous United States is federally owned and managed mainly by the U.S. Forest Service. While existing regulatory mechanisms like the U.S. Forest Service do not address the threat of modification to wolverine habitat in association with climate change, they do offer protection from other forms of disturbance as well as overutilization from harvesting. These agencies include the Wilderness Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, the National Forest Management Act, the National Park Service Organic Act, and the Clean Air Act of 1970. All of these different mechanisms work together sufficiently to prohibit wide-range overutilization from hunting and trapping in the absence of other threats. The final factor, Factor E, addresses other natural or man-made factors affecting the continued existence of the species. In regards to wolverine, small effective population size presents potential threats that have yet to be documented. Loss of genetic diversity within wolverine populations can lead to inbreeding depression and reduction in population growth, which in turn can lead to extinction. Additionally, it is highly important to note that current wolverine populations are said to be a result of colonization effects that have occurred since the 1930s. Due to this, there is low genetic diversity from founders' effects as well. These genetic difficulties, when combined with climate change, are expected to pose threats to the wolverine populations.
As it stands, the proposed policy would offer protection to the wolverine as a threatened species. Intentional take would be prohibited, while there would be no repercussion for incidental take. Human activities would be neither prohibited nor regulated, and there would be no designation of critical habitat. However, the policy would facilitate the reintroduction of the wolverine to its historic range in Colorado. Based on this proposal, we have derived three varying policy alternatives. Policy 1 offers the maximum amount of protection for the wolverine. This policy would list the species as threatened, prohibiting both intentional and incidental take. Furthermore, it would prohibit human activities in designated critical habitat. Finally, the policy would facilitate the reintroduction of the wolverine to its historic range in Colorado. Policy 2 offers the minimum amount of protection for the wolverine. This policy would list the species as threatened, prohibiting intentional take but offering no repercussion for incidental take. Human activities would be neither prohibited nor regulated, and there would be no designation of critical habitat. Finally, the policy would neglect the reintroduction of the wolverine to its historic range in Colorado. Policy 3 offers a realistic compromise between the two previous extremes. This policy would list the species as threatened, prohibiting intentional take but offering no repercussion for incidental take. It would regulate, rather than prohibit, human activities in designated critical habitat, as well as facilitate the reintroduction of the wolverine to its historic range in Colorado. In conclusion, we believe that Policy 3 is the most appropriate alternative. While the primary objective is to list the wolverine as threatened under the protections of the ESA, we strongly suggest a policy that goes beyond this limited defense. Our research, logic, and intuition assert that human activities do in fact impact wolverine populations. However, the determined policy must be based on the best available science, and that is where our problem lurks. A shortcoming in our understanding of the wolverine is impeding the implementation of effective policy, and therefore, said best available science is the restrictive medium through which policy alternatives must be compared. In this light, Policy 3 serves as a realistic alternative that compromises environmental and developmental incentives. Nevertheless, efforts to further our knowledge of the wolverine are vital if we are to generate a successful policy and, consequently, a suitable management plan for the North American wolverine.